Welcome into the Pats Nation. I'm Corso. Catone is here. Joe is with us in the booth as always, and you are watching us on YouTube, listening on iHeartRadio, Apple Podcast, anywhere you podcast. You're going to be able to catch us, and of course, 790 The Score. And we want to make sure we hear from you in the nation in Heated Hotline 855-313-PATS PATS 24/7. It's a message line. Leave that message. Maybe Joe will pick one. It's got to be good, though. They got to have a take, right, Joe? I mean, come on.
Oh, for sure.
Got to have a take.
So he's a tough critic, so make sure you have a take, or you can email us in our mailbag, corso.catone@gmail.com. Hey, we got a good one. We're going to talk QB breakdown, talk about Drake May, Jacoby Brissett, and the other two guys. So we'll have on our QB breakdown, and we'll go back into the week and weekly rewind, talk a little Philadelphia Eagles, and we're going to have some critique in Coach's Corner. Gentlemen, how are we doing?
Good. Listen, it's football season, Chris. Good, bad, or indifferent. It's still football season. You got to be excited about that, right? Oh, come on. Really?
Depends on what team you're watching.
Jesus.
Right. Depends on exactly.
Joe, he's always negative, Joe. Negative.
Listen, I got a fellow coach that's a Philadelphia Eagle fan.
Oh boy.
And I really caught it this week. Oof.
Oh, I'm sure you did.
But and I can't even say anything to him about the rings because they beat us.
Yeah, they beat us in one of them. So yeah, what are you going to say?
Anyway, all right. Well, let's get into it. We want to talk quarterbacks, right, Mark? We're going to do it in QB breakdown. Let's have it, Joe.
Okay, now.
Hit it, boys.
God, I like that, Joe.
I like that, Joe.
It's nice, festive, and I like it. Good job, Joe.
On your toes.
Yeah, and make sure you watch it. Get on YouTube and take a look at that because the graphics are pretty cool on that. And when you do that, make sure you subscribe and give us that thumbs up so you don't miss any shows. So, Mark, talking about the quarterbacks this week, okay? So they played Philly. They had that joint practice on Tuesday, which I know you were a little confused as to why just one practice with them, right? But
because in the previous years, whenever we've done joint practices, Chris, it's always been two.
Yeah.
And so I was a little confused as to why it was one, but things change, I guess, right?
Everything changes. They don't even play the same song coming out of the tunnel.
Listen, that has me irked. That when I go there now to watch because I'm going to the Houston game, I'm irked now that's what I'm not going to hear what we typically would hear coming out of the
no
tunnel.
Crazy Train anymore. No Crazy Train.
I don't even know what they're playing, but it's not the same. No. They need it, Chris. It's a total. We're done with the past. It's a new era.
Horrible. But maybe that's just a preseason thing. Maybe they'll have it in the. Well, okay, so let's talk about Drake May first. And to do that, we first need to go back to the Carolina week and the Carolina game. So, Mark, there were 6 guys, 6 rookies that played in his rookie class that week. He was number 6 on the list with the amount of plays he got. He got 7 plays in the Carolina game. It was 2 of 3 for 19 yards, albeit he got a lot more play in the Philly game. Okay. It looked pretty good, couple of mistakes. But what's the story? Why aren't they? And in joint practice, the same thing. I mean, he's not running with the ones. He's not running with the offensive line ones, the receivers and that kind of thing. And you see him out there with some of the backup receivers and Rieger and guys that, other guys that won't even be on the team. What the hell's going on here?
Chris, it was amazing to me last week against Carolina when all the other, like you said, all the other rookies had more snaps than him. And listen, for the most part, the first round quarterbacks taken in his draft class, Chris, all looked pretty good last week.
Yeah.
Drake looked the least prepared and ready than all of them, but he was the number 3 pick in the draft. I was confused last week why you wouldn't give him more reps, more snaps in the Carolina game leave the one offensive line out there, put some receivers out there with him, give him 20 plays, whatever, 25 plays. And they didn't. And I don't understand why that was. What? Because you wanted to showcase Bailey Zappi? Like, what was that about? Why Zappi even out there? Why Zappi even at this point still on the team? But that's a whole other issue. So I was confused why that happened. Because, listen, here's a guy who they've been telling you since they drafted him, since they signed Brissett. Brissett's going to be the starter. We're going to put Drake on the shelf probably for his rookie year because of things that we've talked about numerous times, Chris. His footwork. He hasn't been in the pro style offense. His decisions at the line of scrimmage, his checkdowns, his understanding of what's in front of him, his hot reads, a whole bunch of reasons why they're going to sit him for his rookie season. Yeah. But if that's the case, he's going to go on mothballs. You like to use the phrase, he's going on mothballs. Once week 1 happens, Brissett gets all the snaps to prepare for that week's game. You're not going to put him on the scout team to risk injury. If anything, you'll put Milton on the scout team. So what are you doing with this kid? How are you developing him, Chris? He's going to go on the shelf now for 17 weeks.
Yeah, and so, like, why is this happening? And even in joint practices, Mark, that joint practice against Philly, listen, I know you got to get Brissett ready. I get it. But, like, you can't touch him. It's controlled. You're not really worried about having him go down. You can't sack him. You can't put your hands on him. So, I mean, put him behind there and see what you got. It's to me, it seems like, okay, the coaches, you're talking about Alex Van Pelt, and I know we're going to get into some of this in Coach's Corner, but it bears discussion now, too, where is it that it seems like they had no idea how far away he actually was, okay? And 2, is he really that far away? It's their assessment of all this. Now, you know what I think of the staff, and I think it was just a mosh-posh, a smorgasbord of coaches thrown together of guys that were on expiring contracts and stuff. So you got Alex Van Pelt, who's responsible for this guy, to build this guy from the ground up. His footwork, my understanding, I haven't seen practice, but my understanding is his footwork has improved greatly during training camp, coming back from center. Being under center and his dropbacks, his footwork has improved. His progressions. Now, I get 7-on-7s. He's better than Brissett. He's better than Brissett in 7s. People say, well, what the hell does that mean? 7s. I mean, that doesn't mean anything. You don't have a pass rush in front of you. You don't have an offensive line. What the hell can you gain from 7s? I tend to agree with that to a point. But his footwork looks better. His progressions, where he's reading the field from progression 1, 2, 3, his receivers, has been much, much better in 7s, and some of it in team, where there's argument saying that he deserves to get more with the 1s so that we can see what he is. And don't wrap this kid around his brain so much where you don't allow his athleticism to take over and just go out there, try to make plays, make mistakes, and learn from them, Mark. And it's just not happening.
So, in situations, Chris,
why is it happening though? Why aren't they doing it?
Well, 2 things. First of all, in situations, Chris, where quarterbacks have sat, they like to bring up, well, Jordan Love sat, and this guy sat, Mahomes sat.
Not apples to apples, though.
First of all, Jordan Love sat behind a Hall of Famer, number 1.
Yeah. So did Ron.
You had that luxury, okay? I know we can't stand Rodgers, but he's a Hall of Famer. Okay.
He sat behind the Hall of Famer too, Rodgers.
Who?
Aaron Rodgers sat behind.
Yes, and Rodgers sat behind the Hall of Famer in Bob. Yes. And Mahomes, Chris, people forget, Alex Smith was coming off a borderline Pro Bowl year. He took them to the playoffs. So Andy Reid had Alex Smith playing probably as well as he was capable of playing. Yeah. So Mahomes sat behind a guy that just took the team to the playoffs and actually played well in Andy Reid's system. So otherwise, Mahomes probably would have started, but they didn't need to. They let him sit and watch and learn.
Yeah.
And granted, Andy Reid's system is a hell of a lot more complicated than what we're running. So it helped.
Yeah, it was supposed to be easier. Remember, it was supposed to be easier to learn.
Yeah. So that doesn't equate, Chris. That doesn't, sitting him's going to help him. Listen, I'm not saying sitting him won't help him. However, I still don't think, to your point, Chris, this coaching staff is doing enough to ramp him up. Because listen, if the intent is you sit him this year, he's going to play next year. How are you getting him ready next year?
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean, Chris? Like, what have you done to ramp him up to say, okay, next year during, off season and once we get spring training, he'll be ready to be the number one. Is he going to be ready to be the number one? Because what is your coaching staff doing to get him there? I don't know.
Well, and here's the example. Because against Philly in the game, okay, Drake May played a long time. Okay, got a lot of snaps, a lot of reps, a lot of series. Okay, up through the third quarter, he was 5 of 8 for 47 yards. Not big numbers or anything. Okay, and he rushed for a touchdown, but he didn't put him in a bad spot. He had a 78 rating, 78. But again, it's only 8 attempts. I get it, but like he didn't put
Chris,
him in bad.
Baker missed a couple of balls. He dropped a couple that could have
Beautiful,
been good-sized plays, right?
Beautiful long passes, one down the sideline and one down the seam, where should have been caught for, should have been caught for Baker. Baker missed both of them. So I would say he gets a negative grade tonight. But we'll get to that in the offense. But the point is, May looked pretty damn good. He didn't put him behind the sticks. He didn't put him in a bad spot. The ball wasn't in jeopardy at any point. His footwork in the pocket was good. He moved around well in the pocket, Mark. He got out when he needed to get out, especially on play action pass for the touchdown. So, I mean, he looked pretty damn good when you put him with some talented players, Polk, Baker, Butte.
And I will say this, Chris, too. Let's temper it just a little bit because I don't think Philly played any starters on the defensive line, right?
But
I think Philly had a lot of their 2s and 3s out there, too.
Yeah, don't mistake what I'm saying. I'm not saying he should start the season. I'm just saying he could have looked a hell of a lot worse with what we've been hearing in camp. So, Mark,
you're right.
The answer to me, I'll answer my own question. Could it be that this coaching staff, I don't think much of this coaching staff, okay?
Yeah,
could it be that they're saving their own ass, okay, by leaving him on the shelf during practice and all that, because they're having a tough enough time just organizing practice, getting everybody to learn the new offense. Now you're going to take building a quarterback from the ground up, and do they really want to be exposed as a coaching staff? Does Alex Van Pelt want to be exposed that way that he can't get it all done? So let's just kind of put him on the shelf for now. What do you think?
That's a good question. Because listen, this is the first time Van Pelt's ever done this. Could be. That could very well be, Chris. That's a good theory, and it could very well be. I am going to tell you this. I honestly thought Brissett would show me more as a veteran who knew Van Pelt's offense. I haven't been impressed with Brissett. So
Mark, Brissett was 3 of 7 for 17 yards. They were on the goal line. He threw a pick.
Yeah, I haven't been impressed with Brissett, so I don't know. Yeah, in the Philly game, so I don't know. For a guy that knows Van Pelt's offense, Mayo has said he's our number one. He's our starter. What the heck is he shown? He didn't show well in the joint practice either. So it's a little scary, Chris. If you think Brissett is that far ahead of May, maybe he can listen. I understand he can read defenses. He understands the NFL offense. He can run an NFL offense. I get that. But what he's actually doing on the field, Chris, Brissett isn't impressed me at all.
No, it just doesn't. It doesn't lend you to believe they're going to win a lot of games.
No,
no. There's other reasons that's not going to happen. We're going to talk about it next. But that's. I look at Brissett and I say, okay, is he a guy that can not put you behind the sticks, not put you in a bad way? Well, he didn't do that. He didn't do that against Philly. He threw the pick against Philly in that game. So it's going to be a long year with the quarterbacks. But I'm saying I still don't think May should play. I just feel like
I'm not saying
he gave him a chance and he showed more.
Yes, I'm not saying he should play, but you're right. They gave him a chance and he showed more. And he probably could have showed even more than that, Chris, if they used him more. Because at some point, you're going to have to speed up or accelerate this kid's development, Chris. Because otherwise, you use the third pick of the draft on this kid. Listen, Jordan Love was picked in the 20s, Chris. Mahomes was picked, 11th, 12th? Yeah. And I know Mahomes is a Hall of Famer, but neither one of these guys were picked third in the draft.
Right. So pay attention to it. Let us know what you think in Heated Hotline. We'll have more breakdown. We'll see how he finishes camp and how much they use him. But QB Breakdown was presented by Corso and Catone Saturdays, 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern. You never want to miss that. We got loads of things, Yankees, Red Sox, and, of course, Catone's comments. Make sure you're tuning in for that. But, hey, when we come back, we're going to go back in the week and weekly rewind. All that and more. Stick around. The real deal New England field. What does that mean? We're like you. We're going to bitch about everything.
My opinion, our draft, the good, the bad, it was ugly.
These people, Mark, drive me freaking insane. Bananas.
It's so frustrating and aggravating. I can't take it.
The real deal New England field. It's going to be real. Back in with more Pats Nation. Joe, when that's the first time I'm seeing that. It's a pretty good.
Yeah, me too.
Good commercial, Mark. With that, Joe. When I see it though, it makes me feel like, God, we need help.
I actually, there was a bit that I cut out that Mark basically just said that. It's like, you both said I need a lot of help. He's like, my wife's should be disgraced.
She is disgusting with him.
Yeah, it was great. I had to cut it out for time though. I was like, I want to use that.
Yeah. Well, that goes without saying that she's absolutely disgusted with you.
Please.
So a lot went on this week. We talked a little bit about it in QB Breakdown, a lot with the Philadelphia Eagles in the joint practice in the game. Let's go through it in Weekly Rewind. Joe? I'm going back through the week, about a weekly rewind. Okay, Mark, so we have the joint practice with Philly. We have the game. And so let's take it back to the joint. Let's start with the joint practices, okay? And let's talk about I want to talk about the offense. I want to talk about some of the bad. I want to talk about some of the good. All right? Now we only
was there good?
We only have 15 minutes on this, so you can't drag on and on and on like you like to do. I know, you could sit and talk negative forever on this team.
Me. Oh, my God.
But no, let's talk about the overall. What's the overall take for you? And I want to get to some of the guys that have been at the practice. We're going to hear from Greg Bedard. He was on the radio this week and talk about some things Phil Perry had to say that were there. But what's your take on what you're hearing?
Well, if you want to start with the bad first.
Of course.
Listen, if they allowed the plays to play through, Chris, supposedly there would have been 14 sacks. How is that even possible that you would have allowed 14 sacks? Is the offensive line that bad?
Yes. You're talking about the joint practice
sacks?
now.
The joint practice. I'm sorry. Yes. The joint practice, 14 sacks they would have had, Chris. How is that even conceivable, 14 sacks?
Listen, it's what we talked about. It's what we thought with this team. It's what we thought. It's what some of the beat writers thought that were down there. And you know what? Let's hear from Joe. If we're ready, let's hear from Greg Bedard. I want to hear what he said, and we'll talk about that on the other side.
To watch. It has me questioning everything. From the decision to draft Drake May, to what they're doing on the offensive line, to the lack of urgency to address any personnel on the offensive line. And I had a feeling that it was going to go this way. I didn't think it was going to be that bad. And if this doesn't send the coaching staff and the front office back asking serious questions like, what the hell are we going to do? The Patriots are in real trouble this season.
And that was Greg Bedard of the Boston Sports Journal earlier this week on the radio. And listen, I mean, that's the overall consensus, Mark, of what's happening here. It's across the board. Now, taking aside the decision to draft Drake May, I mean, we've talked about that. But looking at the offensive line, like you talked about, I mean, they see it too. They're there. And I think one of the problems is the continuity. They're not good. None of them. Andrews, Owinu, okay. But there's no continuity. There's no idea to say, well, we're going to, this is the group we're going to put together. We're going to put this group together. We're going to stick with them. And to me, it should be David Andrews at center, right? At left tackle, left guard, it should be Sidney So. At left tackle, it should be Okafor. At right guard, it should be the rookie, Robinson, who I think has showed well. He's one of the only guys in the O-line that was winning one-on-one battles and in joint practices. And I think you got to move Owino back to right tackle. And I think if you put this lineup out there and let them stay put, maybe you can be a little just serviceable. But with the amount of guys that just keep coming and going out of the lineup, Alvin Anderson and Lowe and some of these, and Caden Wallace, who can rotate with Okafor. But, right? Isn't that an issue?
It is an issue. Whenever you read who's running with the ones, you're right. They got different guys, different combinations. I mean, listen, the season open, you got one more game, preseason game, and then that's it. It's cut down, and you're prepping for week one. I mean, you're right. If you haven't figured out what your offensive line rotation is yet, and try to build that, as you said, that cohesiveness, that's a problem, Chris. Because if you remember, the great Dante Scarnecchia said, you have to be in sync like a well-oiled machine. Everybody in that line needs to know what the person next to him is thinking and how they're going to react to something. And we're nowhere near that, Chris. Nowhere near that.
No. And then even in sticking with the line, because you can't get a gauge of anything else.
No,
you can't get a gauge of anything else.
No.
You're talking false starts, penalties, fumbled snaps. Just they look behind. They look disorganized, dysfunctional, which all goes to the coaching staff, which all goes to everything we talked about training camp. Is what is this? What is it going to look like? What's the flow of camp going to look like? The practice plans and schedules. Well, it don't look so good right now. And it also goes to what we talked about the free agent stuff. You're on now your 5th year, Mark. Your 5th year of a rookie quarterback contract. And all I kept hearing is about that, we can spend money now. Well, where's the Tyron Smith of the world? Free agent. You got to pay. Guaranteed money and get a tackle. Why not?
Listen, they had the money to get a tackle, Chris.
Why not you? What the frig?
They didn't want to spend the money, Chris. Listen, you could have gotten Calvin Ridley. You didn't want to spend the money. You didn't want to give the guaranteed money. Oh, his girlfriend wanted to stay where they gave you a BS story with him. They could have gotten the tackle. They didn't want to spend the money on the tackle, the guaranteed money. You could have got Ayuk. They didn't want to spend the guaranteed money. Like
we don't know, but we think that's the case. And I think we have a pretty good, history tells us that. You're
right. You're on a 5th year of a rookie quarterback contract, technically. Right. And other teams spend when they have that freedom and that those resources to spend, because you're not spending it on the quarterback, but not the Patriots, Chris. We're not doing that. We're doing the opposite. We're re-signing the bums we have to manageable contracts with a low amount of guaranteed money. You finished bad enough to have the 3rd pick in the draft last year, and you're re-signing these guys? It's inconceivable, Chris, what they're doing and how they're trying to build this team.
And the funny thing is, you start to hear some players that seem David Andrews, and we got a clip I want to hear and what he talked about after practice one day, that it seems like these guys either are delusional or they just threw in the towel, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can't sit here and say it was great or bad. I thought that we did some good things, and but there's obviously going to be some things we can clean up. But overall, like I said, I thought it was a pretty good day.
I mean, Mark, that's David Andrews, the center for the Patriots after the joint practice. Listen, I love David Andrews. Nobody's got bigger eggs than him on this team, okay? And nobody works harder than him. So let me tell you, he's got my utmost respect, okay? But Christ almighty. I mean, how can you walk away from that? I get it. He can't. What's he going to do? Come out and say we suck? Well, maybe he should. I mean, maybe he should. Maybe, you come out and say we good and bad. It sucked. It was horrible on the offensive line. It was awful. So is he just pretty much saying, what's the point at this point?
Well, listen, are they just accepting and resigning to the fact that we're going to suck this year? It is what it is. and we'll go out and we'll do what we got to do, but we're just not a good football team. Is that the mindset that they've accepted the fact that this is a rebuild and we're not going to be any good? I mean, I know a little bit later in the show you're gonna play Kraft's clip, and it seems like that's Kraft's friggin' thinking, but we'll get there in a few minutes. Chris, listen, the offensive line, I know it was a joint practice. 14 sacks, really? And then, Chris, at the joint practice, because of the way it's set up, guys were working out on they were running drills and doing things in different fields. So on one field, the Patriot coaching staff was running it. On the other field,
you talked about this yesterday on Corso and Catone.
On Corso and Catone. It was the Philadelphia staff. The Philadelphia staff, Chris, it was a well-oiled machine. And they were basically doubling the amount of work that they were getting in compared to what our coaching staff was doing. How are you doing? That can't go on, Chris, in a training camp. And that happens day after day with us.
Yeah, the reps were 2 to 1. For every 2 reps they took, it was 1 for us. That's how slow and stagnant. Machine,
Chris.
Yeah. So it's a problem, and we'll see how they end camp, but that's the bad. Now, there was some good. There was some good on the offensive side this week. Not so much in this game with Baker, but I thought Polk, Baker, Pop Douglas, even Butte, when they got the chance because of all those damn sacks, I thought they looked pretty good, Mark.
They did. Listen,
Polk needs to be with the ones more.
Well, I was going to ask you, why was it that Rieger and Thornton were with the ones in that joint practice? What was that about?
I wish I had an answer. I mean, unless they're just trying to make a decision, as to which. I don't know. I can't tell you why. I don't have an answer because I think both of those guys need to go. I mean, I like Rieger, but we don't need a guy for kick return. You got plenty of guys that can do that.
Yeah,
judging from what I see in the the new kickoff rule.
Yeah, I don't know why those guys are out there running with the ones. That's I believe that that's a waste of time wasting that instead of getting Douglas and Baker reps. And I understand Thursday night in the game, Baker dropped a couple of balls he absolutely should have caught, and I think he will. I don't think he's a guy in college who dropped a lot of balls. So I don't know what that was about.
You look at that game, Mark. Baker had 3 targets. Baker had 3 targets. Polk had 3. Douglas had 2. Butte had 1. This is up through the 3rd quarter. It was. So I mean, Rieger only had 1 look, and I don't even think Thornton.
I don't even know if Thornton saw that if he was on the field. They didn't look to him.
So, but Polk. I mean, talk about Polk, talk about Baker, because look, Pop Douglas, okay? Let's start with Pop Douglas, okay? He's just not a guy he's not going to be Edelman, he's not going to be Troy Brown, simply because of his size. He's not big enough to take that pounding all season long. So if your thought is he's going to catch 120 balls from the slot, that can't happen because he can't hold up. But you can use him out of the backfield. You could Debo Samuel him. You could jet sweep with him. You can run him from the slot. You can run him on the outside. This guy, Mark, is lightning. You gave me crap yesterday for this. This guy is lightning fast within the first 15 yards, like Tyreek Hill. Not Tyreek Hill. He's not Tyreek Hill.
Would you please stop making that comparison, please?
I am making the comparison because he can run away from anybody. He can run away from anybody.
Joe, he's delusional, Joe.
Okay.
I don't know what he's watching.
I am not delusional. Yes, he can't downfield. He's not going to run away from guys all the way for touchdowns. But within the first 15 yards, don't tell me. I'm telling you, he can get separation. He's the best on this team at being able to do that, in my opinion. You talk about Polk and Baker.
Polk, Chris, I think is a guy that can catch 70, 80 balls for you. I think that's the type of receiver he is. I mean, even Thursday night, he caught a ball, they threw him basically a 2-yard out, and he wiggled his way for like 8 yards, 9 yards, whatever he got on that. But he's a guy you can do that to all game long, Chris. He's going to be a guy I think you're going to see this year at the end of a game, 7 catches, 8 catches, 60 yards, 70 yards, 80 yards. And at the end of the season, you're going to say, wow, he caught 70 balls this year, 75 balls this year. Yeah. I think he's going to be that type of a receiver. Now, Baker, on the other hand, Chris, should be able to stretch the field. I know he had a couple of drops, but he did stretch the field. Should have caught both those passes Thursday night.
Beautiful passes by May.
right?
Both of them.
But I think Baker, Chris, will catch those balls. And you know what interesting, Chris, was this week? Baker, after one of the practices, was speaking to the media and insinuated, or did insinuate, he came right out and said it, that he's got, at this point, he's got a better rapport with May than Brissett. And that's something he's gonna work on with Brissett, because right now he's got a better, I got a better rapport with Drake, he said, on the field.
That sounds okay to me. I'll take that.
No, it sounds
you're gonna
okay
suck.
to me
You're
too.
gonna suck anyway. You might as well have a
but
rapport
Drake's
with the
not
guy who's
playing,
gonna,
so
right. But you might as well have a good rapport with the kid that's going to end up being your franchise, hopefully. So yeah, that was some of the good, and obviously a lot of the bad from the offensive performance at the joint practices and the game. And so this portion of Weekly Rewind was presented by Corso Law Group, corsolawgroup.com. When we come back, going to continue on with the week, talk a little defense, all that and more. No flipping.
No one ever thinks they will be in need of a criminal or traffic lawyer, but things happen. Corso Law Group is Arizona's leading criminal and traffic law firm. Call or go online to corsolawgroup.com and talk with these expert attorneys.
Back in the Pats Nation. So, Mark, listen, we're going back through the week. We talked a lot of offense, and everybody's talking mostly offense instead of defense, and simply because that's where
simply, Chris,
that's the big deficiency.
And that's where you got the third pick in the draft. You took Drake May, so everybody wants to talk offense.
But looking at some of the defensive situation, so let's talk the bad. Okay, this is just Joe. Does this say something about us that it's always the bad first?
It says something about you, not me. I'm always very positive, and I want to exemplify the good, but you're the one. You're very negative. You listen to Catone's comments. Mike Catone's comments is always very positive on Corso and Catone. Yeah.
Why do you let him get away with saying this stuff, Joe?
Positively negative.
So looking at some of the defensive things that we saw first in the joint practice, and I'll give you some numbers from the game, in the Philly game. But again, we take more from the practice than we do these games, because you just can't look in the game. Hurts didn't play. AJ Brown, Waddle, Smith, Devontae Smith.
None of them played Thursday night in the game. No.
So it's hard to get a good read as to what, and you're not really showing everything you're going to show as far as a game plan. A lot of base stuff, a lot of base defensive. But during the week, okay, my observation of what I heard, now again, we're not there at practice, but from the things I was hearing and the numbers they were given, it seemed that Philly was real crisp. They were really crisp in their offensively too, and defensively, but offensively they were crisp in and out of huddles, not a lot of penalties, not a lot of turnovers, no miscues, not so many miscues, looked very organized. Whereas some of the defensive situations where they were scrambling at times, was my understanding, to get set, play calls not getting to the guys when they should have. They look sort of disorganized, a little slower. And that goes to what we talked about in the overall practice flow, we'll call it. Yeah?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Positively. Listen, what you've been talking about, Chris, has showed up in the joint practice. Okay, what you talked about when you talked about what you've been hearing about practice and the importance of practice, and you talked about what they've been doing, a lot of more work on with sevens and 11s, and you said, but you need the reps and you need the routines and we weren't seeing that, and that showed its ugly face, reared its ugly head, I should say, at the joint practice.
Yeah,
on Tuesday, right? That lack of crispness showed up, and lack of how we get in and out of things in training camp showed up.
Now, I'm not giving them a pass. I'm not giving the defensive front a pass. I'm not giving the team a pass. But it's been damn easy for them. The pushback they're getting from our offense, our number one offense, it's not what they need. Now they come over here and they come in and they're playing the Phillies offense. And now you're talking about the ones. I mean, you're talking about the ones, Hurts, AJ Brown and company. So that's a far cry from what you're seeing every day against your own team. I will say that. But there's no excuse to be slow, especially in training camp when defenses should be ahead of where the offense is. It's not easy. I'm never going to say it's easier to play defense than offense. I'll never do that. You'll never hear that from me. But
Chris, your defense.
The concepts.
Chris, if you're going to win any games this year, it's going to be because of your defense, is what everyone's saying. Well, we should have a top 10 defense.
Right.
I don't know. Do we really have a top 10 defense? I don't know.
Well, and individually, I think the defensive line. The defensive line they're good, but they're thin.
And Bondmore's going to really hurt them this year.
Yeah, of
Chris,
course. I mean, that's going to hurt a lot. I mean, as I said, it's a good defense, but it's
now you don't have Judon. You trade him.
Yeah, so you trade Judon, and now you don't have him either. You're right, and I think you'll miss him a little less because I think White is that good.
Okay, yeah, all right.
And I think Uche is good. He had a sack. He had a sack against Philly in that game.
Chris, talk to me about Gonzalez, because you had mentioned last week that you didn't think he was struggling. Not that he was struggling in camp, but he wasn't finishing plays. You didn't feel as though in camp.
So I have him down as the good in the minute, but that's okay because there is some because it's a cross. I'm not sure what to make of this. The knock in this situation during camp has been he's not finishing. So what you want to see with a corner, what you always want to see from a corner is you want to finish the play. You want to finish the coverage. So he looks good off the ball. He looks good getting at the phase where he's side to side, hip to hip, covering the guy there. Then it gets to the ball's in the air, and now it gets to the point of the catch, and it looks like he just stops. Like he just quits, stops, and the numbers aren't good. On one-on-ones, on sevens. I mean, it's across the board. And I'm trying to understand that. It's one of these things, and even Mayo called him out on it, and I'm trying to understand, is it one of these things where he just feels like I'm anointed? I had a good month last year, and now I'm the man over here, because you got to finish. It's just, it's one of the things you talked about when they drafted him. And I hope I don't have to take this on the chin, but
I hope not. But
the dog, the Jason Tatum, not the cross sports, that issue. Does he have the dog? Because he in joint practices, he looked good against AJ Brown. AJ Brown after practice said it. He said, "This guy's a player. This guy gave me all I wanted."
Yep.
So does he just rise to the challenge when he has to?
Well, let's hope.
Not good.
No, it's not good. But listen, in order for this defense, Chris, to be good, he's going to have to be a shutdown corner. Because of this, their weaknesses in the middle of the field, Chris, he's going to have to be a shutdown corner, and for this team to be good. So we'll see if he becomes that during the course of the year.
Do you think it's do you think there's a level of concern here that there's so many other concerns, but do you think this one is one that we should be real concerned with?
Yeah, I do, because Chris, if he doesn't have that dog in him, that's a problem in this league. That's a problem. Now, listen, I'm not going to make it I'm not going to say one way or the other. It's way too early to make that decision, but it is something to watch for as the year develops, Chris, is, when he's matched up against a team, I'm assuming, number one, how does he play? How does he respond to that and react to that? And to your point, can he finish the play? Yeah. And prevent the guy from making the catch, right? We'll see.
Because in the first month of the season, with the month he played, where he was all defensive NFL player of the week month or whatever it was, rookie, I think. He played against a lot of good receivers during that period of time.
He played against Tyreek. He played against he did.
CeeDee Lamb, and company. Yeah. And he held his own, and better than held his own. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you just hope that there's the dog. You hope that there's that dog in him. And as far as, how do they look against Philly? I mean, look, some of the good, again, I'll put that in some of the good. They continue to look good in games. Now, Philly's not playing anybody on the other side of the ball, really, but they had another, again, they had another, how many? 4 sacks, and that was in the first half. You know, Dietrich Wise got in the act, so didn't Josh Uche, and Keon White had one. So you say, well, okay, they're not playing against anybody. Well, I mean, you can't have it both ways. You know, you can't dog them, you know, for playing. You can't dog them for playing against, but then not praise them for, you know what I mean? Like they could be lousy against the.
Absolutely. Chris, listen, they could be lousy. I understand they're going against 2s and 3s, but they're doing what they need to do. And they made, they're getting pressure, and I understand they're playing against 2s and 3s, but you're right, Chris. And the other thing is, you mentioned Keon White and Uche and Wise. So the thing we haven't discussed is, so they traded Judon this week.
Yeah.
And now he was your starting defensive end when healthy. He was your edge guy. They traded for a 3rd-round pick to Atlanta. What are your thoughts around that? Was it? Did we get a good haul for him? Should we have did it? What do you think?
I think 2 things, and this is not trying to get out of answering the question, but I think 2 things. 2 things can be true. They got a lot back for him. You got a 32-year-old injury prone guy. Yes, he's had a lot of sacks, over the last several years, but he's also had trouble finishing seasons too. So to get a 3rd-round pick, and he was disgruntled. And usually you don't see a 3rd-round pick come back for a guy like that. 4th,
no, because
5th,
teams
round.
know you're up against it, so they're not going to give you a 3rd-round pick.
So you got a lot of value back, okay? What I don't like about it is I'm not one of these people who wants to just – last year I felt different because it was such a mess. But I don't want to just tank. I don't want to just get rid of quality players, leaders on the team, guys that are good in the locker room, are good with younger guys. I don't like just getting rid of those guys. Okay, I know he's long in the tooth, but damn it, you couldn't give this guy 2 more years, 3 with not even seeing that 3rd year mark, and pay him a little more money. You got the money. It's not my money. I don't care. I think they could have used them more.
There we go.
And I guess we're going to have to see what that 3rd-round pick becomes. But
yes, we're gonna have to track the 3rd-round pick and
they couldn't pay him, Mark. They couldn't pay him because of how my strike 1 for him of the camp was that scene with Judon. And so you couldn't pay him after that, which you put yourself into that hole, right?
No, because if you pay him, Chris, that's a slap. Yeah. Like, you look bad, weak. You loot that. That's a bad look in the locker room. You let a guy come up and basically tell you off, tell the GM off, and you're going to now give him a contract extension. There was no way, Chris. You and I said it when it happened. It's a bad look if you sign him to an extension, even though you probably should. Now you can't. Now your hand is forced, and they traded him, which, we kind of thought after that they had to.
But as far as the football goes, as far as what it means for the defense, I mean, it's a loss. You got a guy that's on the edge. Do I think they can make up for it with Uche and Keon White? Yeah, I do. I think Keon White's that good where he's going to make up for that. And don't forget this too. They were pretty damn good without him last year.
Oh, yeah, they were. They played just as well, if not better, once he left, Chris.
So, what's it going to mean on the field? We'll see what that pick yields, But overall, I mean, I think you got to be okay with what the defense is doing. But I agree with you, Mark. Without Belichick in that room, I still think the defense is going to take a step back this year. I just do. Especially a guy like Gonzalez could have used him.
Oh, I was just going to say that, Chris, because if you remember, Ty Law always says he only became the corner, the shutdown corner and press corner he was because of Bill and because of what he taught him. He taught him how to play that position. So that's definitely a loss to Gonzalez when you lose that, Yeah.
So we'll see what happened, but that's the week that was, and we want to hear from you in Heated Hotline. Email us, call us, let us know what you think of them so far in camp, and what you think of how they're going to finish camp. We'll put it on the air. But Weekly Rewind was presented by Corso and Catone, the real deal New England feel. Saturdays, 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern. Hey, we got it all. We got Yankees, Red Sox. We talk B's and C's. Catone's comments, and you can already hear him give himself credit for Catone's comments on Saturdays. So you never want to miss that. But hey, when we come back, going to go into the coaching room in Coach's Corner. No flipping. the real deal New England field. What does that mean? We're like you. We're going to bitch about everything.
My opinion, our draft, the good, the bad, it was ugly.
These people, Mark, drive me freaking insane. Bananas.
It's so frustrating and aggravating. I can't take it.
The real deal New England field. It's going to be real. Oh boy, is it real? Is it real? I mean, Joe sometimes got to reel us in a little bit on that show, yeah?
Oh, just look, they don't got to reel us in. Come on, forget it.
No, he's got his
go off the rails. That's all.
Yes, yeah.
He's got his fingers on the bleep button all the time. You know,
That's
Is that what
because
you call
you
the
you can't control yourself, not like me.
So back in with more Pats Nation. All right, Mark, we kind of hinted around to it in previous segments, talking, you can't help it but to bring coaching in to some of these things you're talking about.
Yeah.
But let's now dive into it. Let's get really into it with Coach's Corner. Joe?
Let's go for right from there.
Okay, there we go. Sorry, little technical thing here. My earpiece went out. So Mark, talking about the coaches in this situation, we talked a little bit about this already, but overall, now I told you when we came into camp, you asked me, what are the things we're trying to find? What are we looking for in camp, right? What are the things we want to see? And one of the things which kind of made your eyebrow kind of raise up, like, oh, this is what you're looking for, was what's practice going to look like? What's the flow of practice? What's the practice plans like? How are they, how are the drills going to be? Is it going to be stagnancy? Is it going to be too much time in between? All those things we talked about. Well, what you're hearing out of camp is that it is so sloppy times. There's no flow. There's a lot of, they seem a step slow at times, a little bit disorganized. You mentioned it earlier in the show that Philly had, for every 2 reps we had 1. That means it's slow. It's stagnant. Penalties, turnovers. I mean, we talk Mayo, but who is ultimately responsible for all this? It's Mayo, but is it deeper?
Well, it's definitely Mayo, but I mean, listen, you put together a coaching staff, Chris, where not one guy has ever done what you've asked him to do. You got a first-time head coach, a first-time defensive coordinator, a first-time special teams coach. The O-line coach, Chris, he was an assistant offensive lines coach, right? I don't think he was the head or the lead offensive line coach. Another new. Van Pelt was an OC in Cleveland in name only because Stefanski called the plays. He was an offensive guy. So, yeah, he was listed as OC, but he really wasn't OC. So think about all these guys, Chris, that have never done what you've asked them to do. So what did you expect was going to happen when you put all these guys together in their first camp when they've never done it before? It's not just the head coach. It's the entire staff he put together. Like, they've never done it.
And you had guys down there at camp. Phil Perry, a beat writers on NBC Sports Boston a lot, and his impression, smart guy. I mean, he sees what he sees, and he said this week on the Pats offense versus the Eagles, it would be hard to put a buff and shine on how the Patriots offense performed in Tuesday's joint practice with the Eagles. They had more sacks allowed, 15. We say 14, but 15, he says, than pass completed with 14, with Jacoby Brissett and Drake May behind center. They average 1 penalty for every 10 offensive reps. That's the one thing. That's the part of that statement that I really wanted to focus on. Okay, we talked about the sacks and everything, but when you talk about penalties, and you know, especially penalties in practice.
Yeah, that's bad.
You should be able to avoid that in practice, Mark.
That's bad.
And so it goes to, obviously it goes to the head man. And during that joint practice, Mayo was on the offensive side, they said. He wasn't with the defense, he was with the offense. So does that mean what? He doesn't have confidence in the guy he called basically the head coach of the offense, and Alex Van Pelt? Does he not have confidence in him, I guess, then?
Listen, I don't know. It was just bizarre. What went on was bizarre, that he's with the offense, not looking over the defense. because Mayo's never done, never doesn't know anything really about offenses. Never, that's not his thing at all. And so if he's over there because he's overseeing what Van Pelt is doing, that's a problem. That's a major problem, Chris.
Yeah, and so I mean, and look, and I'm looking for the game as far as what they had for penalties. Look, well into the fourth quarter, they only had one penalty during the
and that was an improvement
game. So that's an improvement. Yeah, I agree with that. But again, with Alex Van Pelt, I told you already in the show, what I'm concerned about. Listen, I don't like the fact the smorgasbord of coaches that is still getting paid from other teams. It's just another cheap thing that you do. Just throw guys together. I wanted an offensive coach as a head coach. I wanted Slowick from Houston to come in here and let him draft the quarterback, okay, and let him decide what kind of offensive weapons to weaponize the offense. They didn't do that. So I think Alex Van Pelt is basically self-preservation by leaving Drake May where he is. We talked about this already. But, Mark, where the hell is Elliott Wolf in all this? Where is he? Why haven't we heard from him? You made a trade. You had things going on where you were looking for Ayuk. You had stuff happening that the GM's involved in. Where the hell is he?
I don't know. He's been miraculously quiet about all of it. Hasn't said anything. Hasn't said boo. But yet he re-signed all their players to extensions, Chris. So that was his priority, I guess, and he achieved that. If that was the priority, he did it. But you're right. We haven't heard boo from him with Ayuk. He trades Judon. We haven't heard anything. So it is interesting that it's radio silence from him. And in the old days, you'd have to worry about that because Belichick was the person making those decisions. So he'd go to a press conference and they'd ask him. Of course, he wouldn't give you any information, but at least you had somebody you could ask about it. You're right. There's Mayo, but can't give you any information. He can't tell you anything. If you ask him about Judon, what's he going to tell you? You know what I mean?
Yeah. To your point with Judon, I know we talked about some of this, but the back himself, and I mentioned it briefly. With Bill. Okay, this Judon situation that happens. Look, you could compare the 2 years. You had it happen, where Judon was not happy with his contract a year ago either. But what happened? He wasn't front and center. He wasn't out in front of the public. He wasn't talking about it. He was down on the other practice field, down the lower field, working out. Talking about nursing, getting back, from his injury, and just working out as far as conditioning goes. So you kept that quiet. Therefore, you could give him more money. You could give him that little bump of money, to tie it up to appease him. But Elliott Wolf and Gerard Mayo go and have that spectacle take place on the field.
That was ridiculous. Totally ridiculous.
Which I called strike one, right? That was the first strike I had against Mayo.
That was the first strike against Mayo. You had that
of camp.
Yeah.
Well, now you've backed yourself into a corner that Bill would never have backed himself into. Yeah. So all this transparency, the media, we love it. Everybody loves it because, you're getting all this information now. Where Bill didn't give you crap. But we are the real deal here. And from a fan standpoint, you probably want Judon on this team right now. And
you do, but Chris, their hand was forced. After the way that played out with Wolf and Mayo, you're right. We said it. There was no way he could come back, Chris. You couldn't do it. You just can't do it. It was impossible to do.
Listen, I'm tired of the kumbaya stuff. Like, is it getting old to you? The joy and the happiness and, everybody feels good just about being there.
Yeah, it's a bunch of, I don't get what that's about, Chris. Listen, your team is going to suck. And I think, listen, if they don't realize that this team has a problem, I mean, you heard Bedard's clip earlier in the show. Bedard was totally disgusted about what he saw. Right? And rightfully so.
But how things have changed, haven't they?
Oh,
how the narrative has changed when you go back 2 years ago to now. Joe, can we play that Kraft clip?
Larry, last Thursday night, I went over to Gerard and shook his hand, and I said, first time in 25 years, I can say to someone, we're ready to build some new great chapters. I don't know what our record's going to be this year, but I'm very excited about what's going on right here at this level. Having seen how Gerard and Elliott and Matt Groh and the new coaches, I think it's like 18 or 19 new coaches. I don't even know their names, and I've been worried about how things would get integrated here, and I'm really proud the way it's coming out.
So, Mark,
What?
I mean, look at. Let me take a few. Let me ask you. There's a few points that I took from this, and I want to ask you. Okay.
Oh my God.
New for the first time in 25 years, new grade chapters in this organization. That another punch, another
Bill.
shot.
Yeah.
How did you take that?
Oh, I absolutely took it as another shot at Bill. Like, you haven't had enough. You didn't do enough with that stupid dynasty. You're continuing to take shots at Bill. I mean, are you kidding me? Really?
What the hell? What's the purpose of that?
I don't know. I really don't know. I just don't get it. But Chris, the thing I took from it was, I don't know what our record's going to be. Like, he's admitting we're going to suck, but I'm okay with it because we're building something. What?
Yeah. That's why I say how the narrative has changed over the past 2 years.
He wanted nothing but a playoff appearance last time he spoke when Belichick was here. Right? You got that letter as a season ticket holder, right?
I don't know where it is. I think I actually chewed it up and spit it out, literally.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, that letter talked about it's unacceptable. This kind of performance. We expect to be in the playoffs every year. We expect to be competing for champions. That was back then. It was we expect to be competing for championships. Then it turned into, well, we expect to be in the playoffs, and
now he's
it's
basically
this.
telling you we're going to suck, but I'm okay with it because we're building something here. Okay.
Yeah. So this is what I mean about the kumbaya nonsense.
Yeah.
So that's coming from all the way from the top. You're basically saying, what? You know why, Mark? Because I'm sorry, Gerard Mayo should not be the head coach of this team. I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it and say it till he gets fired, which is going to be in 2 years. You mark my words. He shouldn't be the head coach of this team. It should be an offensive. If you were going to go new, then you should have gone new. You should have put an offensive guy. I already told you this. And that's the way it should have been. And you didn't do that. And you just anointed this guy. And so now you got to justify it by saying everybody feels good.
Chris, they didn't even interview an offensive guy. Like the guy from Houston, Slotnick, you wanted him. I told you I even liked the kid from Detroit, Ben Johnson. I liked him too, right? We would have been happy with either one of those guys. But that wasn't even an option, Chris. Not even an option.
No. Then he talks about all these coaches. I don't know who they are. I don't know their names.
Why would
because you took a collection of throwaways. You took a collection of cast-outs from other teams that nobody else wanted, Mark. Nobody wanted these guys.
It's like the island of misfit toys.
Yeah, except Rudolph and Santa's not showing up to pick them back up again. You know what I mean? That's the only difference, But like I said, I mean, it just look. This team, I agree with Bedard. We heard it earlier in the show. This team's going nowhere, and they're going nowhere fast. And I don't know how to fix it right now.
I'm just going to say this. You heard it here on Corso and Catone. Chris predicted 3 wins before anybody else said how bad this team was. On this show, you predicted 3 wins. And you're going to be right, Chris, if they even get to 3. So, but you heard it here on Corso and Catone first. 3
Pats
wins.
Nation and Corso and Catone.
Oh, well, it was. I think it was Corso and Catone first, then Pats Nation.
Well, stay tuned for the next coming weeks because we're going to give we gave our picks twice. Now we're going to start the season. We're going to pick again and see if our win total is the same. But the Pats Nation was presented by Corso and Catone Saturdays, noon to 1 p.m. Eastern. Get on, watch. All of our shows are up. Make sure you subscribe. Give us that thumbs up. Come back next weekend, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern. We're going to preview the last preseason game against Washington. And anything you bring to the table, we will be ready. We are the Pats Nation. See you next Sunday.